Hence we start with standard 6 NCERT history R past 1. So getting on to the first chapter, what, when, where and how. So this chapter says us about what did the early man did and when did he did, where did he did and how did he did. So when we get back into the history, we know that people, they were hunters or herders or farmers or gatherers. So these were the occupation possessed by early men. So they started to move from place to place looking for a better habitat to live. So when they don't find the resources to live there in a particular place, they started to move to the next place which is better than this. So most probably it was on search of food or water or shelter. So likewise, the early men, they chose few places in India to settle themselves. So let us see few places where they settled and which period where they settled and what is the development made by them in the particular area and what was the occupation they did in the particular area. So it was in river Narmada's bed, which is on the banks of river Narmada, they started to settle. Henceforth they had good water resource in river Narmada, and also it was just down the Vindhya range. So in Vindhya range they can get all the natural resources what they want, trees, fruits and so on. So they possessed two occupation there, either gatherers or hunters. So if they were a gatherer, they started to move into the forest and they will get all the natural resources like fruits, seeds, stalks and so on for cooking. And also if they were a hunter, they started to hunt the wild animals for the meat and skin and so on. So next place where which they settled was Suleiman and Kirtar Hills, which is in northwest region, which is in present Pakistan's border. So it was about 8,000 years ago. There the people who settled in Suleiman and Kirtar Hills, they found that wheat and barley is edible for human. So the natural growth of wheat and barley was seen there, so through which they understood that these wheat and barley was consumable by the human, and they also reared animals there. So what were the development made by the people settled in Suleiman and Kirtar Hills, where they started to make small villages through which civilization, socialism got developed. And also people settled in Garo Hills, which is in northeast in Purvanchal, and also in Vindhya Hills in central India. So in both these places rice was cultivated for the first time, so through which we can understand their occupation is agriculture. And also people settled in river Indus, which is also called as Sindhu. So this was about 4700 years ago. So here you have already heard that Harappan civilization developed on the banks of river Indus and Satluj, Chenab, Ravi and so on. So these places was cities were developed which was on good architecture. Good planning was there for making the city, and able administrators, rulers were there. And also people settled in river Sun, which is tributary of Ganga. So about 2500 years ago the Magadha empire developed there, Mauryan dynasty developed there. So let us see all these places in map. Yeah, so you can locate Suleiman and Kirtar Hills, which is in the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So this place was the place where they found the natural growth of wheat and barley, and they started to use it, wheat and barley. And you can locate the river Indus, which is the part where they started Harappan civilization, and you can see the Garo Hills, which is present in Purvanchal northeast region where rice was cultivated for the first time, and in Vindhya range, and here also the rice was cultivated for the first time. And here river Sun where the Magadha Empire developed. So these were the places, few places where in early men in India they settled. So getting back into the slide, now we are going to see how India got the name India. So when we turn back into history, as civilization developed in India, all around the world there were few more places where civilization developed, like Rome, Egypt, Greece, and so on. So these were few places where civilization developed. So the people from there, they had trade with Indian people. So the people from the western region, they reached India, and they met firstly the people who are settled in the banks of Sindhu river, which is Indus, Sindhu river. So due to the naming of rivers as Sindhu, they called the people who settled there as Hindos or Indos. So through the word Hindos, the word Hindu originated, and through word Indos, India originated. So due to the word Hindu, few people in India called India as Hindustan. And also in Rig Veda, about 3500 years ago, India was also called as Bharat, which is nation. And moving on to the next slide, knowing about the past, how do we know about the early men, how they lived in the past? So it is mainly on three ways. The first one is manuscript, the second one is inscription, and third one is archaeology. What is manuscript? Manu means handwritten. Handwritten. Manu means hand, script means writing. So handwritten copy of history was found in many places. So the early men, they wrote in palm leaves or birch. So palm leaves, the people who settled in the place where palm leaves were available, they wrote in palm leaves, and the people who settled in hilly areas, they wrote in birch. Birch is a tree in which the bark of the tree will be soft in nature, so they can write it on it. So the languages what they used were Tamil, Sanskrit, and Prakrit. So Tamil, it was the language where Sangam literature was developed, and Sanskrit is one of the most ancient languages in India, and Prakrit. So this Prakrit language has an importance at the end of BC, because it was termed as the lingua franca about in the 2nd BC. So all the people in India started to follow this language Prakrit, and day by day this language was hidden. And also through inscription we can know about the early men. So how do we know about early men? Through inscription. Inscription is nothing but writing or picturizing some scenario in the hard surface like caves, rocks, and so on. So just picturizing a human who is hunting an animal with a weapon. So through this carving we can find that the early men are hunters. So we can understand the early life of them through the picturization of their life in a hard surface. And we can know the early men, how they lived, through archaeological studies. What is archaeology? Archaeology is study of remains through excavation. So by digging the soil and getting the things what they used, bones and so on, you can find the age, in which age they were present in this region, and what are the things and how did they civilized themselves. So we can know about them. And we also followed naming of time in two different parts, that is BC and AD. So BC is a part which is before Christ, before the birth of Jesus Christ, and AD is the part after the birth of Jesus Christ. AD is Anno Domini, which means the year in which Lord gave birth. So we also had BC as BCE. BCE means before Common Era, and AD is referred as CE, which is Common Era. So hence we complete chapter 1 of NCERT, and henceforth we will move on further chapters, and subscribe our channel to get notification. Thank you.